Long before White Lotus made us loathe and secretly envy the fabulously well-to-do, F. Scott Fitzgerald gave us an even grander and bleaker portrayal of the deleterious effects of obscene wealth in The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald was published in the thick of the Roaring Twenties in 1925. It was the middle of Prohibition, a time when, by all accounts, people seemed to be drinking more than ever. I personally really got a hoot out of this novel, even though I read it much later in life than I think is usual. And despite this book being so old that it was literally pocket-sized versions of it were distributed to American soldiers during World War II, it's that old. And yet, I want to try to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible because my whole reason for making the review is because I hope that you will read The Great Gatsby, or if you've already read it, especially if you read it like in high school or in some sort of mandatory setting, I hope you consider maybe rereading it because it really is something else. In a nutshell, The Great Gatsby is the story of a young Midwestern man, Nick Carraway, who goes to the Big Apple to work for a while, see the city, see the world, but really it seems like he's just trying to run away from a situation back home that he doesn't want to deal with at the moment. However, that running away is not even a plot in the book. It is something that's only alluded to by a few throwaway lines from Nick, who is our narrator. The story is framed as Nick recounting a series of unusual events that he experienced firsthand while in Manhattan. And so it is the story of a young man who becomes part of the, society scene of Manhattan for one extravagant and ultimately tragic summer. The crux of the story is that Nick reconnects with his Manhattan dwelling cousin, Daisy, who has married rich and has become part of the scene of the New York East Coast elite. And Nick is hanging out with Daisy and her crowd. And because of Nick's connection to Daisy, Nick becomes an object of great interest to the mysterious and incredibly wealthy Jay Gatsby, who is obsessed with Daisy. So in Gatsby's pursuit of Daisy, he comes to use Nick as a sort of go-between, and Nick and Jay have something close to, but not quite, a friendship that's formed over the course of the book. I would say for Nick's part, it was a friendship. For Gatsby's part, it's a lot harder to say. Themes. Yikes. When you're talking about a classic of the tier of The Great Gatsby, it feels like such dangerous waters to talk about themes because what can I possibly say that hasn't already been said before? And there's, a literally endless number of papers and books that have been written on what The Great Gatsby is about. So let me just tell you a few of the things that really hit me in my most recent reading. Obviously, okay, wealth. I'm not really going to go into the wealth thing. That's well-trodden ground. And I would just say that despite the number of Gatsby-themed parties that occur, The Great Gatsby is not at all a celebration of wealth. It is much more, like I said in the intro, White Lotus, in that it views the wealth and the way people use it with an incredibly cynical eye. Fitzgerald's writing in the middle of the Roaring Twenties, and he is not at all praising the ethos of the Roaring Twenties. He is holding a mirror up to it and condemning it. One of my favorite themes in this book is what I would call the deadness of the past. It's a theme that I love whenever it pops up in art, and I find that for whatever reason, it does seem to be really pervasive to like early 20th century American fiction. There seems to be a lot of this thinking about and dwelling on, again, what I would call the deadness of the past, which is this idea that we if we strive to attain a desire that was forged long ago, it is inevitably going to prove illusory because it is, in fact, already gone. It is in the past. In the context of The Great Gatsby, that would be Gatsby's dream of having a meaningful relationship with Daisy. They had, some sort of encounter in their youth, and he felt that due to his lack of wealth, there was no avenue for him to pursue Daisy, and so he has aspired to one day recapture her once he has attained sufficient wealth. And the story finds him already having attained immense wealth, so now he means to achieve his original goal of obtaining Daisy. At the end of the book, we get a great line about Gatsby that I think beautifully illustrates not only this theme, but just the remarkable prose of Fitzgerald. It's almost the last sentence when Nick Carraway says, Gatsby had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. The romantic relationship of Gatsby and Daisy that's lost somewhere, back in the past, somewhere in those distant rolling fields of America, reminds me of a line that I love in All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren, which I think also has a theme of the deadness of the past. He says something like, the friend of your youth doesn't really see you anymore. Instead, he sees a face that no longer exists. Just meaning that, your childhood friends, when they see you, they don't see you, they see their childhood friend. And that actually leads into a theme of the book that I find even more interesting and maybe gets discussed a little bit less. I don't know. I don't want to make a claim. I haven't done extensive Gatsby research, but at least something that resonated with me a lot this time was there's a really pervasive issue in this book where people ignore or fail to see the personhood of the other people around them, particularly the women, and particularly Daisy. Both Jay Gatsby and Daisy's husband Tom just fail to see Daisy as an actual fellow human, as a person. Tom sees his wife as a possession and an object to be owned, and due to his ownership, he can treat her however he wants, and that in his mind, as the not only the man in a 1920s world of gender norms, but also because all the wealth is from his family. He's the old money. He's elevating Daisy up to the ultra wealthy stratosphere, and for those reasons, he never treats her as a wife, as a partner, as a companion. He treats her as nothing more than his. And similarly, Gatsby just treats Daisy as the object of his affection, as the goal he's been working towards, and as this thing that he's almost earned through these years of dedication and effort. And so much so that he struggles to even picture the idea that she is an individual who's lived a life apart from him. And I think there's a great moment in the book that captures this, where thanks to Nick, Gatsby has managed to secure an invitation to go over to Daisy and Tom's house. And at Daisy and Tom's house is Daisy's daughter running around. And Nick Carraway has this kind of throwaway line in his narration about how after Gatsby is introduced to the daughter, Gatsby keeps looking at her, and Nick says, I don't think that Gatsby had really believed in her existence. And that's such a great illustration of Gatsby's Gatsby's rejection of the idea that Daisy is able to be intimate with anyone but him, but also, potentially more problematically, that Gatsby's completely neglected the fact that just like he is, Daisy is a fully rounded person with desires, hopes, dreams, goals, and a life that had to be lived. Every minute Gatsby was living his, Daisy was somewhere living hers. And because he fails to see that, he fails to see a human being. He just sees this beatific image that he seeks to, obtain to fulfill these years of pursuit. Disaster ensues. I think it's very defensible to argue that if both Tom and Gatsby had been able to see Daisy for a person, the book's tragedy could have been avoided entirely. Both the tragedy of Gatsby and the climactic tragedy of the book. Okay, so beyond themes, my thoughts, my impressions of this book. I think when I reread this book, and I definitely will, I could make a new review video with an entirely new set of themes. That is how dense this book is. It is absolutely packed with insights, not just into the human condition broadly, but specifically into the ways that we use each other, neglect each other, and abuse each other, and, as I was just harping on, completely fail to see each other. And that's just one narrow corridor of things this book explores. But what's crazy is it's super short. It's like, in my version, it isn't even 150 pages. You genuinely could read this in one lazy Saturday afternoon if you felt so inclined. So for a book that's less than 150 pages to inspire the legacy that it has, the tens of thousands of essays that it's inspired, and all of the reading assignments and all the effort that's been poured into this book and everything people have been able to get out of it over the years in just 150 pages is remarkable. And perhaps even more remarkable is that pick any one of those 150 pages and you can probably find a line or sentence that is more beautiful than any single sentence in most other books. It is remarkable how good of a writer Fitzgerald is. I think the beauty of prose is sometimes very hard to capture because it's so easy to conflate, for me, with poetry. I think, sometimes if a book becomes slightly poetic, if there's a bit of a meter to the sentences, I pick up on that as being beautiful prose. But that's really just me saying, poetry is beautiful, which it is. But it's hard to capture what makes a beautiful sentence. No meter, no rhyme, nothing, just a sentence that is beautiful. And the obvious thing would be like a really great description of something that is itself beautiful, like a rainbow or the ocean. But what's more remarkable is the ability to make even very mundane sentences beautiful. And so if, like me, you've ever thought to yourself, what are beautiful prose? I suggest you read The Great Gatsby. So who is this book for? Everybody. I think it's for everybody. My rating, 9 out of 10. It's not a 10 out of 10. And I would say my reasoning for not being a 10 out of 10 is I don't think the plot itself is all that interesting to me or all that fun. I've said, in my mind, it goes, the most important thing is character. Second most important thing is plot. Third most important thing is like the world and how interesting and how robust and full and real and rich and vibrant the setting is. And then after that, normally I would say the prose. That's the way I think of my ranking of books, but the characters and the prose of The Great Gatsby have elevated this all the way up to a 9 out of 10 for me. So maybe I need to rethink where I truly rate prose in my hierarchy of assets of a great book. But yeah, I recommend this book to everyone because it's beautiful, it's poignant. I think it will always be poignant. I don't think, I would love if I'm wrong, but I don't think a time is coming where everyone treats everyone else with the respect and empathy and kindness that is deserved. But if that day comes, then maybe this book will, yes, lose a little bit of its poignancy. But until that day, The Great Gatsby, 9 out of 10. Great book. Super easy read. Highly recommend. Finally, can't go anywhere without discussing the cover art. This is the version that I have. And if we're going to judge dust jackets, which is what this is, terrible. Absolutely terrible. This is just a picture of F. Scott Fitzgerald having a smoke. I don't think a picture of an author is ever a good cover outside of the context of a biography. Here's the hardcover. Hardcover, beautiful. Love it. I am all for a book not trying to, through the cover art, give you any images of what the story is or what the book's world is. Like, let you dream all that up. Let the author create it for you. My one criticism, I'd put the title on the cover, On the spine is good. Definitely on the spine. But also, throw it on the cover. The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald. No harm in that. In conclusion, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. 9 out of 10 book. Highly recommended. Terrible cover on my edition. If you like the video, throw it a like. The AI decides what we all watch, but it's good enough to give us a vote.